All right, how you doing, everybody? Today what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to properly use an air conditioning recovery system on a vehicle so that you don't hurt yourselves while you're trying to perform some kind of an AC system repair on said vehicle. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you what we're going to do, what we need to look for while we're doing the air conditioning repair on this. So what we want to do, the first thing we want to do is we want to locate the charging system ports, and on every vehicle there's going to be two of them. There's going to be a high side port and a low side port. On this vehicle, they happen to be over here. They're going to have these caps on them. All right, there's one here and there's one down here. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove these caps, and that's going to access these charging ports. All right, each of these charging ports on the inside of it has what they call a Schrader valve, which is similar to what is inside of a tire to allow air to stay inside the tire. The idea with these ports is we can charge them with the Freon or the refrigerant. Those Schrader valves are going to be able to hold that refrigerant in that system and allow it to operate properly. So we're going to remove these caps. Now that we have these exposed, we're going to go over to our machine over here. Now there's a whole bunch of different AC recovery systems that are out there. The one that we're using is a Cooltech 34288 by Robinair. In order to use this properly, we want to make sure first that the machine is plugged in. We want to make sure that the machine is already set up and ready to operate. If you remember the video that we showed you last week that you guys watched, it was a setup of this exact same machine. The guy set up, he installed Freon into the machine, he showed you how the tanks worked, how the hoses worked, and how all the oil in the vacuum pump was installed and how to check that. This machine's all set up and ready to use for us. It's all plugged in. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn the machine on. All right. When that comes on, it's going to tell us that there is some refrigerant, how much refrigerant is actually in the storage tank inside of the machine. All right, in this case it has 4 pounds, 6 ounces ready to use for us. But right now, we're going to pretend that we're going to make a repair on this car. So if this car were to have come into the shop and it needed a repair, we want to install this machine to remove the Freon from it so we can actually make the repair on the car. So here's what we're going to do. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to install the hoses onto the vehicle. There's a couple things that are kind of important here. First off, notice that there's a red and a blue hose. Each of these fittings is slightly different. We'll get to that in 1 second. The important thing is this right here rotates and locks down. It's like a faucet. All right, we need to turn it on and turn it off after we install it on the vehicle. This is a snap to connect fitting. So what we're going to do is we're going to release this, install it, release the tab and lock it in place, and then we're going to turn this until it stops. All right, we don't need to reef that down. We do not need to over tighten that, just until it stops. So when we put these on the vehicle, we want to make sure that they're open all the way. Both of these should be. So we're going to unravel these, and we're going to take them over to the vehicle. Now, the vehicle itself, this is a high side fitting, flashlight down here, and that is a low side fitting down there. Each of these can only go on in one spot. All right, I can't put the blue hose or the low side hose onto the high side fitting. It simply won't go. All right, the high side, I pull up on this, I push it down, I release the collar, it won't come off, and then I tighten that down just until it stops. That'll lock it in place. I'm going to do the same thing on the low side. Now some of these vehicles, these ports are very easy to access. Some of these other vehicles, they're not. So just keep that in mind. So what we've done is we've installed both the high side and the low side hoses. All right, we've closed these fittings right here. And what that does when we close it is it engages that Schrader valve and allows the Freon in the system to flow into the tank. And if we look at this, we now have a reading on our gauges. It's reading about 50 psi. All right. So our next step is to recover the Freon from the vehicle. How we're going to do that, we're going to open these valves, and we're going to hit this button right here that says recover. Could not be any easier than that. All right. This is telling us right now that our filter has recovered 115 pounds of dirt and debris and moisture out of that system. If we don't replace that filter within the next 35 pounds of recovery, it's going to lock us out. Right now, we don't need to worry about that, so we're not going to replace this now. We'll have that maintenance done a little bit later. So we're going to hit no. It's going to check the pressures, and it's going to start recovering this system. This recovery can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on a whole bunch of different conditions. How warm it is, how cold it is, how much moisture is in the system. It's a lot of different factors. So we're going to let this recover, and when it gets down to zero, we'll show you what we got to do next. All right, so now what we've done is we've recovered all of the Freon out of the system. The system is now safe for us to work on. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect these hoses. We're going to place them back on the machine. We're going to get the machine out of the way. And we're going to be able to make any repair on the AC system that we need to. So let's disconnect these hoses. The way we do that, just the reverse order. We unscrew this fitting right here. We unscrew until it stops, no more. Lift up on the sleeve, take this off. You're going to notice occasionally you're going to have some of this green dye inside of this system. A lot of these new systems have a dye built into this right from the factory. And this helps you to check for a leak if there happens to be one. That way you don't have to insert dye into it, but we're going to show you how to do that also. So let me get this other line off of here. Unscrew this. Let's see if we can get that off there. There we go. Put these onto here. And now this system is safe for us to work on. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to remove one of these lines off of the compressor. We're going to remove this upper line right here, which goes to our high pressure side. So we're going to get the right socket for it, which I believe this is the correct one. Get on this, get our ratchet on here. I'm going to crack that line loose. Pull that off there. I want to show you how the lines hook up to each other and to the compressor. So we'll take this off of here. Remove this line here. And if you look at this line actually has an O-ring on it where there's a contact point right there. So in order to seal this line to that compressor, we need to make sure that this O-ring is intact. Now, since we took this line off, we're going to replace this O-ring. All right, so the way we do that is we're going to kind of squeeze that up and roll that O-ring off of here. All right, and we're going to come over here to our O-ring assortment box. And we're going to see if we can match this O-ring up with one of the O-rings that are inside of the box. So we're going to take this, and it looks like this one's pretty close to what we're using. No, that's not it. That's the guy that we want right there. So what we're going to do, we're not going to confuse it. We're going to take our old O-ring, we're going to throw that out. We're going to take our new O-ring, and we're going to put some oil on it before we put it back onto that line. All right. This part of the machine has recovered oil in it from the AC system. So we're just going to use just a little bit of this right here. We're going to use that to lubricate that O-ring with before we put it back on. We're going to slide this back in place. install this O-ring. Make sure it's lubricated, because if we don't lubricate it, it's going to rip going back into that AC compressor. Now we're going to install the line. Make sure it seats properly. Going to install the nut. Tighten it up to the proper torque. Always remember to use the proper torque anytime you're reinstalling something on an air conditioning system. It's extremely important. So I'm going to snug this down, then we're going to go grab a torque wrench. We're going to torque this in place, and then I'm going to show you guys what the next step in this process is. All right, so now that we've made our repair, what we want to do is we want to make sure that that repair is going to last us for a while. And one of the ways that we can do that to make sure we don't have any more problems with it is to insert some dye into the system. And these are a couple of the different tools that we have in order to insert dye into the system. This one here is almost like a caulk gun. All right, we'll crack that open for you. So what this has a caulk gun style setup. It has a tube of dye. It has a fitting that goes onto the low side line. And what we would do is we just insert about an ounce of dye into the system using this while the system is empty. Remember, we haven't recharged the system yet. This is a smaller version of that. This is what we're going to use today. It does the exact same thing. What we do is we would, if I can get it out of there without splashing myself with dye, we take this off, we insert dye into this tube right here into the cylinder. This is sealed up. We insert this back into place, close this down, make sure that this is sealed. There we go. And this is going to be ready for us to insert dye into the system after we evacuate the system. All right. So we're going to evacuate the system right now. Let's show you what we're going to do. All right. So now we've made our repair. We've got our dye all set up to go into the system. Now we need to evacuate the system. Evacuation means that we need to remove all the air and moisture that was in the system just from the short amount of time that we had that system open. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook our lines up just like we did last time, and we're going to use the vacuum function on here in order to do that. So remember what we did? Slip up on that collar, slide it in place, and then we're going to turn that down until it stops on our high and our low pressure lines. Get that in there. All right, come over to our machine. All right, our system is ready to go. We've got our valves open, and we're going to hit vacuum on here. All right, now what vacuum does, it's going to ask us for a certain amount of time how long we want to actually draw a vacuum on the system. And then what it's going to do is it's actually got a vacuum pump on here, and it's going to suck all of the moisture, and if there's any debris, it's going to try and suck all that out of the system. The longer that you can let this run on a vacuum, the better your repair is going to be. A lot of manufacturers tell you that they want to do it anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. So what we're going to do, we're going to set this up for a 30-minute cycle on vacuum, and we're going to let it run. So let's see what we got here. So enter a new time. We're going to go up to 30. Now before we start the vacuum, when I tell you that we're doing 30 minutes on this, I want you to check on the ALLDATA site for the vehicle that you're working on. Check what the manufacturer wants you to do, how long they want you to run a vacuum on the system when it's been open, because this is going to vary depending on the size of the system, the type of the system, and the manufacturer, all those different things. So for this one, we're using 30 minutes. I'm going to start this right now. And what's going to happen, you look at this, you see it's starting to draw a vacuum on that system. And we'll get back to you in 29 minutes. All right, so this is their charge system tag for this vehicle. All right, and on this vehicle right here, it is the V6, not the V8 option. So it gives us quite a bit of excellent information. It tells us not only that this is an R134A system, all right, it gives us different engine options. It gives us how much the charge is in ounces, in kilograms, and in pounds. It also tells us the specification for the oil. All right. You can also find this information on All Data, Mitchell on Demand, Haynes, any of these other sites will be able to give you this information also. So in this case, we're looking for a charge level of 21 ounces. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to come over to the machine. We're going to hit the charge button. All right, and it has a default charge at the top. In this case, it's 2 pounds 0 ounces. Definitely too high for what we're looking for. Now remember, we wanted 21 ounces. All right, so we can shift this to pounds and ounces, kilograms, whatever form we want. So we want to go down to 21 ounces. All right, 1 pound is 16 ounces, so 21 ounces is going to be 1 pound 5 ounces. That's what we're looking for. All right. So the charge amount's correct. All right, ready to go. We start to begin. We don't touch the machine, and it's going to start charging. See the power, see the pressure on those gauges rising right there? All right. It's important then when you're charging the system that you don't put your hands on the machine. The machine has a very sensitive scale inside of it, and any jostling of the machine is going to cause that scale to give us a false reading. So we just want to make sure we're not touching it. And if you look over there at the screen again, it's telling you exactly how much has been installed into the system. So far we've got 1 pound 3 ounces. You're getting really close. Typically what happens on these machines when it gets close to that last ounce or two, it's going to take a little bit longer. There's a pump inside the machine, and that pump is going to pressurize that refrigerant and send it into the machine just for those last couple of ounces. Okay, so it's all charged. It wants us to press start, and it's going to equalize the hoses. What it's going to do, there's an internal valve inside there, and it's going to make sure that everything in the high side and the low side are equal to each other. So we're going to allow that to happen. All right. Now it gave us further instructions. It says disconnect the high side hose, open the panel valves, start the AC, turn it on max, and then we'll put that to continue. So I'm going to disconnect this high side line. So our vehicle's running. We're going to turn our air conditioning on. So we've got the AC on, max AC. All right, we're going to follow the instructions out there on the screen. All right, so the low side dropped down below 40. So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the low side hose. All right, which is over here. And remove that out of the way. We're going to close these valves. All right, our car is all set. Now we want to work on this machine here. So we're going to hit start to continue. We're going to clear the hoses? Yes, we are absolutely going to do that.